The gymnasium buzzed with laughter, applause, and the squeak of polished shoes on a hardwood floor. Glittering banners stretched across the rafters, end-of-year excellence awards, while parents lined the back rows with phones raised like shields. Jayden sat in the last fold-out chair of the last row. He shifted his knees to avoid a crooked leg on the uneven floor. His hoodie, 2 sizes too big, sleeves fraying, hung over his hands like a curtain. His backpack, patched and silent, rested on his lap. One of the zippers didn't work. It hadn't for a year. He kept his eyes down, but his ears were wide open. Science achievement, Tyler Samuels. Cheers erupted. Jayden didn't move. Most volunteer hours, Sophia Martinez. Applause again. Screams from her friends. A mom whistled with 2 fingers in her mouth. Jayden's lips pressed into a thin line. One seat over, a boy whispered to his friend, glancing sideways. "Who's that guy again?" "Jayden, I think. Doesn't he, live in one of those houses? The state kind." Thought he dropped out. Jayden heard it, every syllable, but his face didn't flinch. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it always did. The sting was familiar, expected, like rain on cracked skin. They were halfway through the awards list now. He counted. 24 names read. 0 were his. A few teachers up front clapped out of rhythm, as if trying to beat sincerity into their hands. His homeroom teacher glanced toward the back, briefly, and then turned away. The girl in front of him had 3 certificates stacked on her lap. One fluttered to the floor. She didn't notice. Jayden picked it up and handed it to her. She didn't say thank you. He pulled his hoodie tighter and waited. He wasn't even sure why he came. No one had told him to. No one ever did. But part of him, some small, reckless, fragile part, wondered if maybe, just maybe this year would be different. Citizenship Award, Michael Bennett. Another eruption. The crowd's noise felt like a wave breaking over him, washing him further into the silence. Jayden looked up, finally. Not at the stage, but at the crowd. Rows and rows of parents. Moms hugging daughters. Fathers gripping their sons' shoulders with pride. Families taking blurry, smiling photos in front of trophies that glinted under the lights. And Jayden? Jayden had a seat, and an empty space next to him that no one had even tried to fill. He exhaled slowly, then let his gaze fall again. He didn't come for applause. He came because hope is a stubborn thing. It flickers even when no one's watching. It whispers, maybe this time, even when the seat next to you stays empty year after year, even when your name is skipped, even when no one claps. The waiting room walls were painted in pastels, but no color softened the silence inside them. A plastic clock ticked too loudly, second by second, like it was counting how long he'd been left behind. Jayden sat in a cracked vinyl chair. His knee bounced, restless, mechanical. The kind of movement you don't think about. The kind that fills silence when hope gets tired of speaking. Across from him, a dusty bookshelf leaned to one side. A worn-out stuffed giraffe sat on top of it, Stitch's smile still intact, as if it didn't know how long it had been forgotten. Jayden, came a soft voice. He looked up. Miss Carly stood in the doorway, clipboard hugged to her chest. Her smile was gentle, practiced, but her eyes gave her away, kind eyes, tired eyes. Jayden rose and followed her into the office. Same as always. 2 chairs, 1 desk, a folder with his name on it and the tray marked pending. He sat. She closed the door gently behind them. He didn't wait. Any families this month? The question landed like it always did, quiet, hopeful, rehearsed. Miss Carly's hand went to the folder. She opened it, flipped through, then closed it again. Silence stretched like rubber between them. He saw it before she spoke. The way her fingers fidgeted with the pen. The way her eyes drifted, not to him, but to the picture of her own children on the desk. The ones who called her mom without paperwork. They chose someone else, she finally said. Jayden blinked. Once. Just once. Then he nodded. Slow. Hollow. That's number 5, he said, his voice even. Dull. Miss Carly leaned forward. Jayden, it's not about you. Sometimes families are just looking for a younger. I know, he cut in softly. Younger. Easier. Less complicated. She winced. He didn't mean it as a jab. It wasn't anger anymore. Just fact. Like gravity. Or rain. Or the way people look through you when your name's never been stitched on a Christmas stocking. He stared down at his hands. Fingers calloused. Nails short. Knuckles bruised from punching nothing but the air some nights when no one saw. You said they liked my letter, he said. The family. The Johnsons. They did. And the photo? They said you looked kind, she whispered. So what changed? She didn't answer. Didn't need to. He sat back, spine straightening like armor, swallowing the burn in his throat. Not tears, no. Not anymore. Just that familiar tightness. The ache of being almost enough. I'll stay at the group home, then, he said. She nodded. I'll head back to school. Another nod. As he stood to leave, Miss Carly reached into the drawer and pulled out a small, sealed envelope. Your birthday's next week, she said. This came in early. Jayden looked at it. Didn't take it. What is it? She shrugged. I didn't open it. But it's handwritten. That's rare. He took the envelope slowly. No return address. Just his name. He tucked it into his jacket. Thanks, he said, already halfway out the door. And just like that, another door had closed. But this time, he left a piece of it open behind him. Because something, however small, felt different. The past didn't come to Jayden in order. It never did. It arrived in flashes. Like a strobe light flickering over pain. He was 6 when it started. A trash bag in one hand. A social worker's hand in the other. His Spider-Man pajama pants dragged the sidewalk as he stumbled forward, blinking up at a house that wasn't his. Be good here. Okay, the woman said, brushing dust off his shoulder. But he already knew what that meant. He didn't unpack. Didn't cry. Just held tight to a small, crumpled notebook. The only thing that had followed him from house to house. It didn't have his name on it, because back then, even that felt borrowed. Cut to age 10. The group home. Gray blankets. Screaming in the hall at night. Lights that never really turned off, just buzzed and hummed like warnings. Jayden sat on a bottom bunk, legs crossed. Writing. Always writing. He found a pencil stub under a vending machine and made it last like gold. Each page of the notebook became a world he could control. A place where no one left. A place where someone came back. One page read, When I grow up, I'll buy a house and never leave it. Not even to check the mail. He smiled at that one sometimes. Even when the others laughed. Even when he got pushed in the lunch line and no one saw. Or worse, when they did and looked away. Cut to age 13. A mirror. Jayden lifted his shirt. Bruises bloomed across his ribs like dark flowers. He didn't flinch. He didn't even cry. He just looked at them. Named them silently. Tuesday, Friday, Sunday night. Then he looked at his eyes. Still there. Still brown. Still burning. He turned, opened the notebook again. This time he wrote, You can't bruise words. The system taught him many things. How to speak quietly. How to sleep lightly. How to vanish in plain sight. But what it never took, what it couldn't take, was that notebook. The stories in it. The boy who kept writing, even when it felt like no one was ever going to read it. He was still writing now. Only the handwriting had changed. Sharper. stronger, each letter like a promise to the kid he used to be, a promise that one day, someone would read every single word, and they'd know he mattered. The gym buzzed with heat and sound, tassels swinging, caps tilted, parents fanning programs like prayer books. The end-of-year assembly had dragged like every one before it. Honor rolls, sports captains, scholarship nods. The same names, the same loud cheers. Jayden clapped too. That was the thing. He always clapped for them, even when no one clapped for him. He sat near the edge of the bleachers, alone, second-hand hoodie zipped high, sleeves pulled past his thumbs. The folded paper in his pocket had been there for weeks, soft as cloth now from how many times he'd gripped it. Then the principal returned to the podium, cleared her throat. One last thing, she smiled, looking down at a new card in her hand. We have a surprise speaker today. Someone who's taught us all that courage sometimes speaks quietly until it doesn't. A pause. Then, Jayden Walker. Silence. Someone in the front row whispered, "Who's that?" Another said, "Wait, that's the Foster kid, right?" The gym rustled like wine through brittle paper. Jayden's chest stopped, just for a second. His feet didn't move. Then as slowly, they did. He stood. The stairs to the floor felt like cliffs. The walk to the stage? Miles. Every pair of eyes landed on him. Not with admiration. Not yet. But confusion. Skepticism. The look people give a locked door they don't expect to open. Even the faculty looked unsure. Jayden reached the microphone. It stood taller than him, or maybe it just felt that way. He didn't adjust it. He just stood there, still. The gym was a breath held too long. Jayden swallowed hard. His hand dipped into his hoodie pocket. Out came the folded paper. He didn't open it yet. His fingers trembled. He glanced once at the sea of students. Rows of classmates who'd never said his name, not even once. And yet here he was, saying it for them. He unfolded the paper. It crinkled like thunder in the stillness. Then he took a breath, one deep enough to carry every year he'd been skipped. Every night he'd gone to sleep wondering why no one chose him. He raised his eyes, just barely, and began. Jayden's fingers shook as he smoothed the crumpled letter on the podium. His voice, when it came, barely registered through the gym speakers like a wind chime in a storm. But he didn't stop. He couldn't, because this was his moment, and he had waited long enough. He cleared his throat once and read, "To the boy who waited." Whispers drifted across the gym like falling ash. Jayden swallowed. The words blurred, not from fear, but tears he refused to let fall. "We saw you at the shelter last month. You were bagging food like it was treasure, like you knew what it meant to go without. You didn't smile much. But when you helped that little kid tie his shoe, that was the moment. We knew." A breath caught in someone's throat near the front row. A girl covered her mouth. Another boy leaned forward, brow furrowed. Jayden's voice broke. He paused, clenched the letter tighter, and went on. "We asked your caseworker. She told us you'd been skipped. Again, that no one had called you son. Not once. So, if you're willing, we'd like to be the first." The gym was silent. You could hear the air conditioner hum, the squeak of a folding chair shifting. Jayden blinked down at the page. Then the line, "You're already our son. We're just waiting on your yes." A gasp, not loud, but collective, like the room forgot how to breathe. Jayden looked up, really looked. His eyes scanned rows of faces, some stunned, some teary. One teacher, hand over heart. Even the vice principal stood, lips parted, as if mouthing the word wow. Jayden stepped back from the mic. The letter fluttered in his hand. He didn't say another word. He didn't have to, because sometimes the loudest voice in the room comes from the quietest heart finally being heard. The shelter buzzed with movement, tables scattered with glue sticks, construction paper, paint-stained shirts, and the occasional burst of laughter from a child lost in imagination. Jayden sat cross-legged on the floor, sleeves rolled to the elbow, carefully taping a fin to a cardboard rocket. Across from him sat a little boy, maybe 5, maybe 6, front teeth missing, eyes too wide for someone who had already seen too much. "Like this?" the boy asked, lifting the other wing. Jayden nodded gently. "Exactly. You're a natural." The boy grinned. For a moment, the ache behind his smile disappeared. Jayden's hands were calloused, fingers steady. Every move he made was precise, slow enough to teach, quick enough to keep the kid excited. He didn't speak much. He didn't need to. The way he listened, the way he noticed small things, like when the boy began rubbing his wrist from nerves and quietly handed him a juice box without a word, that said more than any sentence could. In the far corner of the room, beside a table of silent auction items, a man and woman stood, watching. They weren't flashy. No signs, no sponsorship tags. Just kindness behind their eyes, a softness that grew with each second they observed Jayden. He didn't see them. He was too focused on helping the child gently balance the cone on top of the rocket. "Perfect," Jayden said, his lips curving into a rare smile. "Now all we need is a countdown." The boy stood tall. 3, 2, 1. Blast off. They both shot their arms into the air, mimicking liftoff. Jayden let out a low laugh, the kind that only slips through when you forget the weight you carry. The couple watched that moment. That joy, that boy, quietly giving everything he had to someone smaller, someone scared, because he remembered what it was like to need that. The woman turned slightly toward the man beside her. "He's the one," she whispered. The man nodded, jaw tight, emotion raw behind his eyes. They didn't approach him that day. They didn't want to interrupt something sacred. But later, that night, they called the shelter director, asked for his name, and wrote a letter. The auditorium felt suffocating. The light overhead flickered once, casting shadows across the rows of eager faces that had once only seen Jayden as invisible. The letter trembled slightly in his hand, the folds of the paper worn from being clutched for so long. His voice had broken through the silence, but now, as he finished reading the words, the room was heavier than it had ever been. "I'm just waiting on your yes," the letter had said. The final syllables hung in the air like a thread, suspended between his breath and the stunned faces of the crowd. Jayden lowered the letter, his arms still trembling. His throat was tight. He hadn't expected it, the calm, the silence, the weight of every single eye in the room, now locked on him in a way they never had been before. He looked up. For a moment, nothing moved. No snickers, no sideways glances, no whispered words. The students who used to ignore him, the ones who made him feel small, were staring at him now, without a single sound to break the stillness. The principal, standing to the side, looked as though she too had been touched by something raw. Her hand was pressed to her chest, her breath slow and steady, her gaze unbroken from Jayden's face. The clamor of the world outside this room had paused for a single heartbeat. It was like the whole building had become a memory, a single frame suspended in time. And in that moment, Jayden wasn't the foster kid anymore. He wasn't the boy who had been skipped over. He was just a person, just a kid telling the truth. His eyes swept the crowd, meeting the faces of his classmates, the ones who had never bothered to notice him, the ones who had always kept their distance. And in the corner of his vision, he saw a girl, her cheeks flushed, wiping away tears. She was never the loud one who mocked him, but her eyes were wide, and she was blinking furiously, trying to hide the tears. The teacher sitting nearest him, Ms. Reyes, looked at him with a mixture of pride and disbelief. She had been the one to see him when no one else did, had been the one to help him rise when he felt like sinking. But this moment, was more than even she had imagined. Jayden took a step back, his foot scraping lightly against the stage. His heart was pounding, but the pounding wasn't from fear. It was from the sensation of being seen. For the first time, the weight of his past felt less like a burden and more like a shield. It felt like a promise that he was more than the quiet boy who used to hide in the back, whose name was always skipped over, whose voice had been silenced by the noise of the world around him. And then it happened, a soft clapping. At first, it was hesitant, unsure, but then it spread. The hands in the room started to move together, one clap after another. Slowly at first, and then with more confidence. The applause was like a wave, crashing down and sweeping him up. The loudest students, the ones who had ridiculed him, were the first to stand. They clapped harder, faster. Some of them were even looking at each other in disbelief, but none of them could look away from him. Jayden felt the weight of their eyes, but now it was different. Now, it wasn't judgment. It was awe. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The applause filled every corner of the auditorium, and in that moment, no one could hide from the truth that had been laid bare. The teacher, Ms. Reyes, stood as well. Her smile was soft, proud, but there was something in her eyes, something unspoken, something that said she knew all along. Jayden stood there for a long moment, overwhelmed. He didn't know how to respond, didn't know if there was anything left to say. His throat was still tight, but this time, it wasn't because he was afraid. It was because he finally felt the weight of belonging. The applause carried on, but it wasn't for the words anymore. It was for the silence. It was for everything that Jayden had endured, everything he had fought for, and for the fact that, in the end, he had spoken anyway. And for the first time in a long time, Jayden didn't feel invisible. He felt like he mattered. For 1 second, the silence after Jayden's last word was total, the kind that rings louder than any sound. He lowered the letter, his fingers trembling slightly, then folded it carefully along the crease. His heartbeat echoed in his ears, drowning out everything else. He didn't dare look up. Not yet. And then one clap. It came from the far right. A single, sharp sound that cracked through the stillness like a stone breaking glass. Another followed. Then another. Jayden blinked, looked up, and saw the impossible. A sea of faces rising. One by one, students stood, some with hands over their mouths, some with their palms pressed together, clapping as though trying to pour something more than sound into the air. They weren't clapping out of politeness or pressure. They were clapping because they saw him. Jayden, a name that had never made it past morning attendance. A name written in small, forgotten ink on rosters, never on banners. A name skipped over, overlooked, buried, until now. Jayden, Jayden. It started as a murmur, just one voice, somewhere in the crowd, testing the shape of it. Then another joined, then another, until the sound rolled like thunder across the auditorium. Jayden, Jayden. It wasn't just noise. It was a resurrection. Jayden's throat tightened, his vision blurred. He stood frozen, not knowing whether to cry or run or just stand there forever and soak it in. His name, not in whispers, not in pity, not behind closed doors in caseworker offices or principals' meetings, but here, with pride. Jayden, the assistant principal, said softly at the edge of the stage, her voice trembling. "You can come down now." He couldn't move. His legs were jelly, his chest a hurricane. He glanced at Ms. Reyes, seated on the side, tears glinting in her eyes, nodding, urging him forward with nothing but warmth in her smile. He took one step, then another, and as he reached the bottom step, the crowd didn't stop. Someone reached out and high-fived him. A classmate, a football player who had never said more than a grunt in the hallway. Others followed, pats on the back, claps on the shoulder. It was like walking through light after years in shadow. "Hey, man, I had no idea. You're amazing. Dude, that letter." Respect, bro, seriously. They weren't looking down at him anymore. They were lifting him. Jayden's name echoed against the high ceilings, louder than any announcement ever had. And for once, he didn't flinch hearing it. He stood straighter, let his chest rise, let the sound wash over him like the rain he used to watch alone from group home windows. The applause carried on, long after he took his seat again. He looked down at the letter once more. It was still slightly crumpled, still marked with the sweat of his palms. But it had changed everything. He had changed everything. And for the first time, Jayden didn't feel like the boy who was passed over. He felt like someone who mattered, like someone who belonged. His name didn't feel like a whisper anymore. It felt like a victory. The letter trembled in his fingers. The applause had faded, but the silence was louder. It wrapped around Jayden like a blanket of something he'd never known before: belonging. He stepped back from the mic. A beat, then another, and then he saw them at the edge of the auditorium. A man in a navy sweater, standing tall, eyes glassy. A woman beside him, hand over her mouth, trembling. And between them, a younger girl holding a cardboard sign that simply read, "Welcome home, Jayden." His heart stopped. His breath caught like it had nowhere else to go. He had seen photos, a glimpse in the letterhead, a name signed at the bottom. But seeing them, standing there, for him, Jayden didn't think. His body moved before his thoughts could. His legs, usually slow, cautious, weary, surged forward. Faster, faster. He dropped the letter on the floor, left it fluttering like a feather behind him. The auditorium parted like water around him. No one spoke. No one dared. They just watched, in awe. And then he collided into her arms. The mother, not foster, not caseworker, not temporary, just mom. She wrapped him so tightly he thought the world might fall away. He didn't cry right away, but her whisper cracked everything open. "You're home now." The words were soft, but they hit like thunder. He collapsed into her, shaking. His shoulders let go of years, of couches that weren't his, of birthdays missed, of bags packed too many times. He clung to her like he was afraid she'd disappear, but she didn't. She just held on tighter. The man, his soon-to-be father, pressed a firm, steady hand to Jayden's back. No grand speech, no lecture, just presence, the kind that doesn't leave. The little girl stepped closer, her voice a whisper. "You're my brother now, right?" Jayden nodded, swallowing the knot in his throat. "Yeah, I guess. I am." The auditorium began to buzz again. Whispers turned into claps. Some students wiped their eyes. Even the principal stood, one hand resting over his chest. A teacher, the one who had never quite known what to do with the quiet kid in the back, turned to the crowd and whispered, "That boy? He just changed how I see everything." But Jayden didn't hear it. He was too busy holding on, not to survive, but because, for the first time in his life, he had someone worth holding on to. The lights were warm, soft, flickering. The smell of rosemary chicken floated through the room like a quiet hymn. Laughter danced above clinking silverware. Not forced, not strained, but real. Jayden sat between his sister and his mom, passing mashed potatoes like he'd been doing it forever, like he'd always belonged. "More gravy, kiddo?" the dad asked. Jayden nodded, smiling shyly, still adjusting to that word. "Dad." Across the table, the little girl leaned on his shoulder, content. Her curls tickled his neck, and he didn't mind. Not anymore. The house hummed with something new. Not furniture, not polished countertops, but peace. A home. There were photos now, ones with him in them. On the fridge, on the hallway walls. One above the mantel, graduation day, arms thrown around his new family, the sun catching the corner of his smile. And upstairs in his room, the light from the hallway spilled in, casting a golden frame around his world. His bed was made, not military tight, but lived in. His desk had books stacked, notebooks open, a school lanyard draped across the corner. And on the nightstand sat the old, battered notebook, the one he carried through shelters, group homes, empty bedrooms. Its cover was taped and torn, but now the pages were full. Stories, letters never sent, and a final page scrawled in black ink. Not all families are born. Some are found. Next to it stood a photo frame. Simple, wooden. A candid shot from that first dinner, him, mid-laugh, mashed potatoes halfway to his mouth, his mom's hand on his shoulder, his sister's cheek smushed into his side. He had a place. At the table. In the house. In their hearts. And this time, no one was skipping over his name. The school auditorium was long empty. Rows of chairs stood still. Stage lights powered down to a low amber glow. The podium stood quiet, untouched since earlier that afternoon, but the weight of what had been said still lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. Jayden's footsteps echoed down the back hallway. Not heavy, not rushed, just sure, like someone who finally knew which direction was forward. Outside, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the parking lot. He stopped for a moment beneath the old flagpole, looked up at the wind curling through the fabric. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded letter, one corner worn soft from the number of times he'd held it. He didn't read it. Not this time. He just stood there, letting the weight of it settle in his chest. "You're already our son. We're just waiting on your yes." They had waited, but more importantly, they had seen him. Not the scars, not the silence, not the label of foster kid. They'd seen him, and in that seeing, they gave him something the system never did. A future, a name, a place. He looked up at the sky and smiled. A quiet, private smile, the kind a person wears when they finally belong somewhere. Then he turned and walked toward the car. His mom waved from the driver's seat, eyes red but shining. His little sister poked her head up from the back and grinned. The door opened. He got in. No more empty chairs. No more skip names. Just a boy who once waited, and now was finally chosen. Voiceover as soft piano fades in. Some kids don't need to be saved. They just need to be seen. Fade to black.